enjoyed that short video, what I'd like you to do now is another task. Please take 10 minutes or so to discuss what training methodologies you think may have been developed by Soviet sports scientists during the Cold War. You've got some idea from that video. Are there any others you might think about? Or just discuss it and think about, well, why were they doing this and how did it develop and how did it help athletes, okay? Take some time to consider it anyway, and we'll get back together in about 10 minutes. I'm sure you've got some great examples. Here's just a few that I've got. Again, as always, if you've got something slightly different, please feel free to add that, and of course, add mine to your own notes. So, they developed periodization, okay? Looking at microcycles, macrocycles, planning the year. Okay, we'll cover this in a little bit more detail later on. Plyometrics, certainly, okay? There's a link there, which you'll see on the PowerPoint, and also, okay, in the resources section on Blackboard. I'd like you to click on that. There's a short video showing plyometrics for football. You may actually do this yourself, okay? Certainly, plyometrics is an important part of athletics that was developed by Russian scientists originally. They developed various methodologies in terms of strength and power development. They looked at optimal work-to-rest ratios. They looked at regeneration and recovery strategies. They looked at optimal training stimulus in order to facilitate specific adaptations. And that work there was a guy called Yakovlev who came up with a few of these ideas, okay, a Russian scientist. They also looked at the contributions of different energy systems to sport performance. And they looked at optimal nutritional practices. Again, there was some element of supplementation, shall we say. Not just making sure you got your 5 a day there. There were some darker things going on as well with drugs and so on, okay? Which I'm sure you've got some idea of. This leads us into ergogenic aids. They weren't always legal and they weren't always ethically correct, okay? Performance enhancing strategies in that way. They looked at interval training. Of course, while the Soviet Union was continuing to win lots of Olympic medals, the United States was also undergoing its own sports science revolution in an attempt to keep up, really, okay? What you'll see at the bottom there, okay, going back to the Soviet Union, is a hyperlink called the Red Army trailer. And this is a YouTube video, which is a trailer for a documentary that I recently watched. It's about the Soviet Union ice hockey team, who were incredibly successful in the 80s. Take a look at that trailer, and it really does give a good idea of how they use sports science to improve their Olympic development, okay? It's a great documentary as well, by the way. You don't have to be interested in ice hockey to watch it. It's really, really good, and I recommend you take a look if you can. I did touch on the fact that the West was catching up with the East. America was catching up with the Soviet bloc in terms of their sports science development. Particularly since the breakup of the USSR, Western countries, they've really been trying to catch up and to use the very systematic approach to training that the Soviets used so successfully for a great number of years. We might say that the research that came from the USSR during the Cold War actually laid the foundation for other countries and their national athletic development program. Of course, some athletes and coaches defected. This means they left the USSR. They escaped, in effect, and came to live in Western countries, okay? And they brought their ideas with them. The ideas such as periodization, plyometrics certainly, and interval training, well, these are now seen as fundamentals to almost any athletic training program, including football, okay? I mentioned earlier, when we talked about the USA, a gentleman called Dr. Cooper, Kenneth Cooper. And I think it was in 1968, he released a book called Aerobics. Now, this is a term that's quite common these days, isn't it? But Kenneth Cooper was the first guy to really pinpoint its benefits for us in terms of athletic development, and also, of course, from a fitness and health-based perspective. Cooper was really intrigued and puzzled by the poor performances of strong athletic males in endurance activity situations. He was looking at guys, for example, in the American university system, who were wrestlers and so on, very strong people, but they were struggling when it came to cardiovascular training and cardiovascular events. So in order to solve this issue, Cooper coined the term aerobics and developed his own training methodology. The aerobics training methodology emphasized the concept of steady-state cardiovascular exercise. Cooper's aerobic training methodology became extremely popular in the USA shortly after his book was published and released. So really, Cooper is often credited with initiating the fitness revolution in the USA. You may have heard of the Cooper Run, for example. This was developed in 1968 for US military use, for the Army, Air Force and so on. In the original form, the point of this test was to run as far as possible within 12 minutes. You'll also see a link there, another hyperlink. Again, as usual, click on PowerPoint or look in the resources section. And there's a link there to Ken Cooper's aerobics website. Some good information on there from the Cooper Foundation.